Getting her busy.
Yeah.
What we like to see.
Morning, guys. The people joining us. Just waiting for a few more to come in before we actually kick off this morning. Here we go. I think we'll make a start now. We'll probably get some more joining in. Firstly, guys, just a massive thank you for joining us this morning. Whether you're new into holiday lets or experienced into the market, yeah, thanks for joining us doing this webinar regarding holiday lets and a bit of a deep dive. So before we get into it, just a couple of little introductions for you. So some of you will know me. My name's Stu. I am the field-based BDM for Hodge Bank, and I cover all of Wales, the West Midlands, and then from Wolverhampton right the way down to Land's End. Joining me today is lovely Hema Patel. Hem is our northern BDM, and Hem basically covers anywhere north of Birmingham, right at the top end of Scotland. We're also privileged to have Mr. Robert Ford. Rob is our head of mortgage originations, or as we like to call him at Hodge Towers, the underwriting guru and the man who gets all my dodgy cases through if he possibly can. So yeah, so that's the intro's done for you guys. Just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today before we get into the actual presentation itself. Myself and Hems are going to go through a little bit of a presentation, a bit of a deep dive into the market, what is driving the sector currently, some of the opportunities out there for you guys, but also then how we can help and support you and your clients with the holiday inquiries which are still coming through the door. At the end of the session, then me and him we'll have a bit of a Q&A with Rob, where Rob can help us to what to expect from us as a lender, what we expect from you guys with regards to the underwriting process, and how to process and submit these more complex holiday cases at the moment. If you've got any questions, we've got some questions already set up to ask for Rob, but if you guys have got any questions, please do use the chat facility provided. And me and Hema will pick them up as we go along. If you've got a chance at the end to ask Rob, we will, but if not, we'll take them offline for you. But we will come back and answer any questions that are submitted via the chat facility for you. All right. So without further ado, I know more people coming in, we're just going to make a start on the presentation for you. So let me just share my screen quickly. So me and Hema will share the responsibilities on the presentation this morning. So I'm just going to kick off with a little bit about Hodge as a lender. Now, we entered the holiday let space back at the end of 2019, literally just as the world as we knew it changed due to the pandemic. Some might see that as a little bit of a stroke of genius, some a little bit of luck. Now, one of the main effects of the pandemic was that people suddenly realized what was on their doorstep and what the UK has to offer in terms of a break or a family holiday. And let's be honest, on the short-term rental market just went bang. Every man, woman and dog wanted to see the seaside or the countryside or the mountains. Now, for those who don't know me, you can probably tell from my accent, I do live in the South Wales Valleys. I do live in the stereotypical 3-bed terraced ex-miners cottage. And me and my wife probably could have rented our house out for £1,000 a week because I have a mountain to my left and I have a mountain to my right. And we, as many other lenders in the space, really reaped the benefits realistically of the pandemic. Now, we'll talk to you today about how we're set up to support and help you and your clients to achieve what they need to achieve or what they want to achieve, whether that's growing a portfolio, starting one, or even buying a property to rent originally with the overall goal of eventually moving into it and maybe living by the seaside. Now, on that note, I'm just going to hand over to Hema, and she's going to take you through what we're going to cover off in the next 20 or 25 minutes. So, Hem, over to you.
Thanks, Stu. So today we'll be running through an informative agenda. We'll be talking about the definition of a holiday let, market overview. So we're going to have a look at the size of the opportunity in the market, and there is a lot of opportunity out there. The current market demands. So we're going to explore the current demand using some really interesting stats from Sykes Cottages, which Stu will be bringing to life. alongside looking at the challenges in the market and how these differ depending on where the property is. And of course, most importantly, we're going to talk to you about how Hodge can help you place your cases with our criteria and updated property changes. And then, of course, Stu has already alluded, we've got the pleasure of Rob Ford, who's the king of our underwriting castle, who's also be joining us today. So what is a holiday let? So it's a property that is let for the purposes of a holiday for a short-term let, and the let is no more than 3 months. However, in reality, it's probably more of a weekend break or a week or two with the family. Staycation popularity, now that continues to surge. The UK travel bug is still going strong. So research from Verdant Leisure suggests that we may see a boom in the UK staycations this year due to the cost of living. And a survey that was conducted by 1,000 Verdant customers revealed that there were more than 4 in 5 were likely to go on a staycation in 2024, with over half of those saying that the cost of living crisis would sway them towards a staycation over a holiday abroad. So why? So currently it does have favourable tax benefits, may I add, but you must seek advice from a tax specialist to learn more about the benefits and implications, as these are set to change in 2025. Many young clients do it to supplement their income. So some may want it for a family retreat for the weekends, for a long weekend or school holidays, or they just want to spend some time with the family. And then you've got the more mature borrowers. So they may not have a decent retirement fund, so it can support with their future retirement planning as well. So as you can see, there are various reasons why a holiday let would be a desirable investment. But I'm going to hand over to Stu now to go through the guide of Market with Mintel. Thanks, Stu.
Cheers, Hem. That's a great overview for you there, guys, of what actually is a holiday let, and some of the recent changes come along. And it demonstrates really that there are still plenty of opportunities out there. So even with the Chancellor making the announcement in the budget that some of the tax benefits for holiday landlords are going to be scrapped next year, there are still plenty of chances and opportunities out there for current investors, new investors, even brand spanking new people into the market to really make a great return on their investment. Now, any BDM worth his salt will tell you that we love a stat, and to emphasize the point. So the lovely people at Mintel, who are a leading research provider for ourselves, I've gone out and done a bit of research for us. And I just want to pick up 2 of the main stats that are on this screen there. The first one being that volume of domestic holiday rentals will be 8.4 million in 2026. Now, that's a massive amount of rental income coming in from both domestic and foreign tourists holidaying any of the 4 home nations, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, Scotland, England, including Northern Ireland. Now at Hodge, we are well set. We do lend and support across England, Wales, and Scotland, but not quite in Northern Ireland yet. And we're well versed in the 3 countries with the legislation changes that have happened and will be coming along. And between me and Hema, we do cover about 3/4 of mainland UK as well. So if you've got any questions regarding changes for that, just pick up the phone and have a chat with myself or Hema regarding that. The other big stat there is the associated spend on these domestic holidays of approximately around 3.4 billion. Now, this for me is where the UK government have a bit of a juggling act to do, especially again with the changes the Chancellor's as mentioned last month coming in next year. And some of the challenges that each country has with changes to legislation, we'll come on to that shortly within the presentation. Now, holiday let is a main source of income to many coastal resorts, many rural towns, many cities across the country. And the government, have to get the balance right between raising money via the new taxes, keeping the sector going, because it does inject such a vast amount into the UK economy, but also doing the correct thing so that local residents are not continuing to be priced out and can still actually buy in their local areas, not having to move away. But I think that discussion is for people with far posher accents than myself in the House of Parliament to have, rather than me. I'm willing to have a conversation over a pint, probably not on a recorded webinar with about 150 other people, to be perfectly honest. So we've also taken some information from a leading management firm in the form of Sykes. Other firms are out there, are available, but many of you already in the sector will know Sykes well. They do have a great view and overview of the market overall. But if we just take some, the two main stats there on the left-hand side, the main one being that 63% of owners are still planning to extend their hold-to-let portfolio in the next 5 years. So the demand is still there. People, existing landlords, existing portfolio customers are still looking to buy and increase that portfolio size. The demand is still there for this sector. It isn't all doom and gloom as some of the press will have it out to be. And nearly a quarter of all landlords have actually flipped their long-term buy-to-let property into a holiday let. Now, it's widely reported that a well-run holiday let will generate up to 4 times the income of a standard buy-to-let placed in the same area. Now, the returns year on year of a holiday can be substantial, depending on the location, granted. So just be mindful when you're talking to your clients that they've done their research, you've done your research. And if you are in any doubt about where someone is looking to potentially buy or even flip a property over onto a holiday from a standard buy-to-let, just pick up the phone and talk to us. We've got Rob on the call today. We have access to Rob. We've also got access to our head of property underwriting, Jonathan, who's willing to look at properties potentially outside of the usual areas for it. Now, I'm not about to say I'm going to suddenly lend on every single property there's a buy-to-let onto a holiday let. There's still got to be a demand in the area for that type of lending. But there are still plenty of opportunities that don't have to be in your historical areas. Again, pick up the phone and have a conversation with the experts. We know what we're doing. We know these areas potentially where there's growth. And that's another point that we'll come on to shortly. And flip back over to Hems now, and she's just going to take you through a little bit of what is driving this market at the moment. Hems, over to you.
Thanks, Stu. So moving on to the holiday let demand. So now, of course, over the recent years, there's been a huge drive for the UK holiday let market. And there's all sorts of reasons behind this. So, of course, the pandemic, we were restricted as to, and we were unable to go abroad. And also during the pandemic, people were discovering towns and cities that they've probably not visited before. I personally, myself, as you know, covered the Scotland area, as Stu mentioned, and there's so many parts of Scotland that I wouldn't even think about going to. So again, people are discovering more and more towns and cities that they've not previously visited, with many people now choosing to stay and holiday in the UK, or maybe choosing to have a week or two abroad, but then choosing to have the odd weekend staycation in the UK. So amongst other things that happened in the pandemic, so for example, a lot of people invested in extending their family by introducing a pet or a dog or any other different type of pet, but also into the family unit alongside pets, there were children, which meant that it was a bit more difficult to go abroad. So with many clients looking towards a holiday let within the UK, where they can take their pets and also take friends and family. Then, of course, we can't ignore Brexit. So Brexit has meant that maybe people who look towards investing in a property in the UK market rather than investing in a holiday home abroad. So holiday home in the UK has become a lot more attractive. And of course, the green agenda. So there's a lot of people who are really passionate about climate change, and maybe they've changed the way they want to travel. Rather than flying abroad, they may choose to stay in the UK and take advantage of the towns and the cities and the more scenic areas that we have on our doorstep. And market changes. So we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into this as we go through the session. But I'm going to hand over to Stu over to the next slide to talk about the 3 nations. I don't know if it's got anything to do with rugby, but I'll let Stu explain that.
You're talking to the only Welshman who doesn't watch rugby, so it's straight over the top of my head. Anyway, cheers about him. Yeah, so we have spoken about Hodges' ability to lend across the 3 nations, England, Wales and Scotland. The market, as anyone who's been in it for a while will know, that it has grown rapidly over the last 3 years. And with that growth, it has brought pressures and concerns. It hasn't all been sunshine and roses. And certainly there's certain parts of the UK around the out of season and what can happen to these communities with regards purchase prices, the ability of locals to actually buy. in the area. It is a tricky balance, as I mentioned. I'm not a politician. This is for a discussion for people with far more powerful jobs than I've got. But I personally think I do believe that both can live in harmony. As I mentioned earlier, the sector does bring in substantial income to the UK, but there has to be something done so we don't end up with potentially coastal ghost towns in the out of season where it is just Bill and Jane living there, nobody else within the local vicinity. Now, each nation has made changes to legislation. There's a few up on the screen there, and that's to try and reduce this risk of these ghost towns actually appearing. As you know, anyone who's on the call for who is based in Wales or does any lending over in Wales, there are certain councils within within us who have increased the council tax on second homes, and Scotland have brought in their licensing requirements to try and prevent or at least slow down the Airbnb types of letting. We will still accept an application in Scotland. Hem has made me say this at least 3 times this morning. For as long as the license has been applied for. So if you've got someone who's looking to buy in Scotland, it's a new property which isn't a holiday let, just make sure they're applying for that holiday let license at the time of application with us ourselves. It hasn't got to be granted, but the application has just got to be in there. So again, if you're not in the sector on a regular basis, just read up on it, read up on the areas potentially the customers are looking to buy in, and make sure that you're passing on the correct information around there. Again, unless you're tax qualified, none of us are tax experts on this call. Just align yourself with a tax advisor so they can give the appropriate advice as well regarding where the client can buy, what is going to be the most beneficial for them as well. And like I said, it hasn't been all flowers and roses. There are still the challenges out there. And I don't think we'll see the full impact of the Chancellor's changes in the last budget for a little bit, for a little bit of a while. But Mintel are still forecasting the sector will continue to be buoyant. There is still a demand out there for this type of holiday and this type of properties as well. Bookings are up. People are still investing. There's still plenty of really good income to be made for the people in the right areas. So from a personal point of view, I can always see this market continuing to grow as it is. And with that being said, is where do we see the growth areas potentially within the country? Now, this slide will show you the top 10 current areas of growth within the UK. It'll show you location, your average house price, the year-on-year growth, and then the average rental these properties can generate on a 4-bed holiday let in the areas. Now, there'll be some on there that you will expect to see. There'll be some areas on there that you probably wouldn't even thought of potentially. But it just gives the indication that you will always have your go-to areas, your Devons, your Cornwalls, your West Waleses of the world. But some of them are being saturated out now, and there are other areas potentially where investors and portfolio landlords can start to look to grow that portfolio and opportunities out there to get a real great return on their investment. Which brings me finally on to the last part of this section, the property wish list, and how can a landlord drive the most from their property in an ever-increasingly competitive space. We've highlighted a little bit of a wish list there. Now, Hem mentioned earlier about people extending their families during the pandemic, and so many people actually bought dogs and now don't want to leave the little friend, the little 4-legged friend with families, or put them in the kennels. They want to take them away with them, and obviously they're not going to take them abroad. So they're looking at opportunities in this country now, and being able to take a pet on the holiday with them instead now is a massive driver. The obvious ones are there. Your hot tub. Who doesn't want a hot tub at the end of the day? You put the kids to bed, settle down with a beer or a glass of wine potentially. It's just that nice little added benefit that if you've got it on, it's going to make that property a little bit more desirable. But I wanted to pick up on 2 of the stats there on the left-hand side. The big one, Hem, we were talking about recently was that 38% said the ideal holiday will have Wi-Fi. Now, anyone who knows me on this call will know I've got 2 girls, 9 and 13, who both love their devices and love a bit of Wi-Fi. But me and Hem were talking about it more around the new working life, the new hybrid working potentially, and the ability to being able to do our jobs not in the office. Now, I'm sat in the Rhondda Valleys, Hem is sat in Preston. All you guys are logged in from all over the UK. You're all on Wi-Fi. So what's stopping us now going away for a weekend potentially, doing a little bit of work on a Friday, maybe doing a bit on a Monday, and then enjoying the family as well? it's going to become a bigger part of what the holiday let is going to need. And that 38%, I think both me and Hema both agreed, is going to be much higher than that.
Absolutely. That's definitely going to go towards an upward trajectory for sure.
Definitely, yes. But the other big starting is that 74% of customers, nearly 3/4, weren't aware of tax breaks of owning a holiday property. So people have already got them. 3/4 of people weren't even aware of some of the tax benefits they could get off the back of it. So again, the negative press that has been pushed on the changes that the government have launched, 3/4 of people weren't even aware of it anyway. So for me personally, maybe that's going to have an impact. I'm not going to have such an impact on the slowdown in the market that maybe people thought was going to come about off the back of it. So hopefully you picked up some really interesting facts, some figures, some things you may have known, some things you weren't aware of. You can go away and talk to your borrowers, your applicants, your new customers, your existing customers, and talk through the opportunities that are out there in this sector. I'm going to hand over to Hems again now, and she's going to talk you through how we at Hodge can actually help and support you and your customers with our criteria. So Hems, over to you again.
Thanks, Stu. So as you can see, we've got a list of informative criteria, and I'm not going to cover it all, as we're going to pick quite a bit of it up. A lot of these points up when we go through the questions and answers section with Rob very shortly. But first of all, Stu mentioned that we do lend in our 3 nations, and our maximum LTV is 75%, and that's for purchases and remortgages. We can allow your client to capital raise for a variety of different reasons, be it consolidation, purchase of a further investment property. So it could be another holiday let, or it could be a buy to let. And the most important one is the family gifting that we do see quite a lot of. And again, another one is the home improvements, which we'll continue to see as well. So one of the most underrated one is the no minimum income requirement. So there's no need for your clients to have a minimum income. It is assessed over a 30-week assumed occupancy. We can also accept first-time buyers and first-time landlords. So your clients don't have to have experience in being a landlord before, or a homeowner occupier. That's really important, as it could be your client could be in rental accommodation or living with a family or a partner. So for example, in this scenario, your client could live, let's say, in London, and they've never been able to afford to purchase a property in that area, but they want to invest in a property outside of the city, and perhaps one of the coastal areas, or wherever they see fit that they've liked, and they'd like to see themselves purchasing a property in that area. So we do a lot of lending on that basis. We also allow the 90-day personal occupancy as well, so your clients can use that time for their own leisure at the property, or with their friends and family. But again, they can use that 90-day to utilise to update the property, which moves me over to our property criteria. We have made some fantastic enhancements where we're so proud to say that, we're probably one of the very few lenders who also have a property team that work alongside our underwriting team. I know Stu mentioned earlier about the property team. So again, if you do have a case, and I know we keep highlighting this, and it might be slightly out of the norm, and you want us to have a look at that case and the property team to look at that before you submit the case, feel free to contact either of us or any of your BDMs, and we'll be able to pass that quirky case over. So as I said, we've made some enhancements to our property criteria. We can accept properties with outbuildings and annexes with shared services. Again, honing in on the 90-day personal occupancy. So we're able to accept properties that are not deemed ready to let, but they can utilise that time to update the property ready to let that. Shared party walls. So properties we can look at now with 2 kitchens as well. But a big one for us is personal names. So our holiday lets need to be in personal names. Currently, there's no appetite for limited companies at the moment. And we can have a maximum, we would allow your client to have a maximum of 10 in the background, and they can have 3 mortgaged with ourselves. So moving on to one of our strongest USPs. So the early repayment promise. So where that has come from. So most of you probably know our history, our background used to be equity release, and this was one of our USPs that we had within our products back then. However, because it's such a strong USP, we incorporated it in our residential product, so in our holiday let that we have, and to allow your client to take advantage of this USP. And in layman's terms, how that works is, let's say your client takes out a 5-year fix, and in year 3, their circumstances change, and they decided it's not for them, it's not working out, or they're moving for whatever reason, and they decide to repay that loan. We would allow that client to repay the loan without incurring any ERCs. So again, we are the only residential lender out there that has this USP on our resi product. So when it comes to support, you've got it all. Sadly, you've got Stu and I, but you do have other BDMs as well that can help and support you in your area. We work in a tag team, so we've got our telephony BDMs as well. So if any of the BDMs were in meetings or events and you had a pressing question or a case that you wanted to run past, then our telephone team will be happy to support you with this. And then we've also got the web chat functionality as well. So just to wrap this up before we go on to our questions and answer session, it really does feel like the last few years has opened everyone's eyes to the opportunities around staycations in the UK and the benefits of the hidden gems that are out there. And obviously, the other side is the investment side. So in terms of holiday let investments, there's plenty of opportunity there as well. So may I thank you all today. I hope you found the session informative and interesting. Now the presentation's complete, we shall head over to Rob Ford, and Stu and I will put some questions forward to the king of our underwriting. If you've got any questions, and I've quite a few, have put them in the chat functionality and we will pick them up. However, if we're unable to answer them all in the time stated, then we will all come back to you individually. So welcome, Rob. Thanks for joining us today in our holiday let webinar. And it's great that we get an understanding of how we at Hodge approach holiday lets from an underwriting perspective, and with your view on the holiday let market today and in the future. So if you're okay with this, I'm going to kick off with the first question, starting with the basics. What are the key basic underwriting requirement brokers should be aware of when placing a holiday let case with Hodge Bank for the first time?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Hem. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for crowning me the king as well, which is always great news. And it's fantastic to see so many people engaged and invested on this call. So thanks, everybody, as Hema and Stuart have already said, for joining. So just in terms of our underwriting approach, I think it's probably first and foremost important to say that in terms of our risk appetite, in terms of our approach, what I've been really, really keen to instill since joining Hodge is a kind of can-do attitude, looking at things through the lens of saying yes, unless there's a really, really fundamental reason to say no. We want to keep it light touch as well. We don't want to make anybody's lives more difficult than needed by asking for unnecessary things. So from a pure underwriting perspective, looking at the risk, it's probably fair to say that far more than on a residential mortgage, we are looking very, very closely at the property rather than the applicant. We want to make sure, obviously, that the applicant meets certain elements of criteria, but that is very light touch. Everything pretty much on our lending decision is predicated on the property. So we're looking at the location of the property, we're looking at the condition of it, and most importantly, we're looking at the rent that can be driven by the property on a short-term letting basis. So the way we'll look at it, as we've already said in terms of our criteria, we'll go up to 75%. We will allow things like capital raising, we'll allow debt con and things like that, because we know that some people will seek to utilize their assets in the most efficient way possible for them. How we'll look at affordability. We will contact local letting agent and get them to confirm the low, medium and high season figures. We'll then blend that over a 30-week period, which I think is really important. It's probably one of the most generous affordability assessments out there in the holiday let space. And also by doing it over 30 weeks as well, we're not expecting people to be renting that property out for the entirety of the year. So they've got the opportunity to use it for their own personal reasons and, allow family and friends to stay there without necessarily generating a rent. So we try and be as flexible as possible in terms of that sort of rental calculation. There are, as we've said, we'll cover the whole of England, Scotland, and Wales. So we're very, very keen on making sure that we're exploring all of those different territories as well. We do understand that there will be times when people don't currently own their main residence but wish to invest in a property. So maybe they're in a long-term relationship with a partner and they see an opportunity to generate some income and also get a capital asset. So we're absolutely fine with that. A lot of lenders won't do that. They'll expect people to be residential homeowners before they take an investment property, but we're not concerned about that. As long as it makes sense, as long as that stacks up, we're absolutely fine with it. So yeah, there's a lot that we try and do to make sure that we keep things light touch, that we look primarily at the property. As you've mentioned, we've got an in-house property team as well, so we do see all kinds of weird and wonderful coming through, and we look at everything through the lens of, let's say yes, unless there's a really, really compelling reason why it can't be a yes. So yeah, that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's our approach. That's our sort of ethos in terms of looking at the underwriting of holiday lets.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Rob. So I think, mate, one of the things that Hem mentioned when she was going through the criteria is we've got no minimum income. So can you just explain to the guy, the brokers on here, mate, what that actually means for us as a lender and the client when they're submitting a case through?
Yeah, so I mean, the no minimum income, I've touched upon the fact that we'll allow people who aren't current residential owners to take an investment property. And again, we know that there may be tax efficiencies sometimes by having a non-earning partner in a relationship who wishes to put a property in their names. That's absolutely fine. We know that happens in the real world, and we're very, very mindful of that. What we don't want to do is start blurring the lines between residential and investment. So if we start putting hurdles and arbitrary sort of figures in place around minimum incomes, then it kind of starts to feel like you're not assessing things on a purely investment income basis. And we want to very much be setting our stall out to say, if this property washes its own face in terms of rental income, that's good enough for us. We don't want to do background checks to make sure that there is a personal income in the background, because that is all of a sudden then when you start to look at things not just on a purely investment income basis, and we don't want to blur the lines. It makes customers' lives complicated, brokers' lives complicated, and quite honestly, it makes my life complicated as well. So I'm not interested in doing it. And you, of course, your life's always complicated, Em.
Thank you, Rob. So next question I wanted to ask you, so how does Hodge calculate the maximum holiday let borrowing figure when you're assessing a case?
Okay, so I mentioned about the fact that we'll get that local letting agent to confirm the low, medium and high. We'll blend those figures over a 30-week period. And then we'll do a 145% ICR calculation. And, there are lots of people out in the market who might, look at a higher ICR threshold. And we try and make sure that it's realistic. We try and make sure that we are cognizant of the fact that these properties are, in the vast majority of cases, going to sail through in terms of the headroom anyway. So we don't want to make it too onerous for people to be able to prove that. So it's a nice straightforward 30 weeks blended low, medium and high, and then that 145 ICR calculation. So it's pretty straightforward, to be frank.
Right, thank you for that. Stu, over to you.
Mate. Yep. So are we seeing a change in the types of holiday let modes you've been applied for, Rob? Are we seeing emerging markets, city breaks over coastal or traditional areas, mate, at all at the moment?
This is always a tricky one. I mean, my personal view, and this is just my personal view, is that there's a kind of maturity around the holiday let market now. I think, if you were asking me that question 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was traditional bucket and spade coastal properties with the occasional sort of chocolate box village in a rural location. I think over the last few years, we've seen people expecting more and choosing different holiday destinations. So we do see quite a lot of city break kind of properties, in your Baths and your Stratfords and so on and so forth, as well as that sort of traditional engine that's driving the whole thing, which is the coastal properties in Devon, Dorset, Cornwall. But there's a whole range of properties that we see through the Lake District through to the Scottish Isles, and but as I say, we see a lot from various different places across the country. I don't think we're in the position anymore where there is a traditional holiday destination. People want different things, and it's the world's moved on, I think. So it's quite interesting that, because if you were looking at going abroad, then there is that huge market for city breaks, and I think probably the UK has struggled a little bit to sort of catch up on that. And I think over the last couple of years, that's probably happened more and more. So we are seeing people pushing more into looking at holiday let properties within desirable city areas.
Just a quick one off the back of that, sorry. There's one that someone put in the chat. Would we lend on the Isle of Wight? And I can never remember if we'd lend on the Isle of Wight or not.
We will lend on the Isle of Wight.
We will, won't we? And what's the minimum lease we'll do as well? Lease term? No,
oh God, hang on! Now, don't start firing these questions at me.
85 years. Sorry, it's a question from John Sharp. Is it 85 years currently is the lease, isn't it?
It is. I'll quickly look it up. I'm going to try and do two things at once. So if I go quiet, you'll know why. But I'm going to quickly look it up because we've got
policy.
So go on, keep talking, Stu, and I will I will pretend that I can do two things at once.
So John, just to answer your question to chat, mate. We will lend on the Isle of Wight, and I think, and Rob just going to confirm, I'm sure our minimum lease at the moment is 85 years. All right.
I'll check that now. Don't worry. I'll come back to you in about 2 minutes.
All right. Hems, do you want to go on to the next question?
Well, I'm not going to fire another question at Rob when he's already
No, it's fine. It's fine. This is good for my development as well.
I've only been here 3 years. It's fine. I should know this question.
It's probably because we don't get that regularly. But one of the next questions is properties key area brokers need to be aware of when presented when they are looking to submit a case with a holiday let lender. Do we have specific property criteria, which I know I went through quite a bit to support the standard criteria that are covered. So do we have anything to support the holiday let property types, and has it changed at all in the recent months?
I think we look at holiday let properties in a slightly more holistic way. If you were looking at a residential proposition and there was a pub a couple of doors down, that's when a lot of lenders will go, oh my goodness, we don't want that. Whereas in actual fact, you filter on things like the Sykes and booking.com and things like that, and you actually filter to see whether there is a pub nearby and it's a real selling point. I definitely filter that kind of stuff to make sure there's a pub nearby. I think what we do in terms of our holiday let proposition is we tend to take a very grown-up view of what people are looking for, what makes those properties desirable on a short-term holiday let basis. So it is potentially proximity to a pub or a restaurant or something like that. We will allow an annex as well, because we're doing these things on short-term lets, so we're not concerned about there being any sort of long-term tenancy and difficulties in sort of getting vacant possession should the worst come to the worst. We've mentioned the fact that we might be looking at situations where there's a couple of families that want to go and sort of stay in a fairly large property, so having a couple of kitchens makes sense, especially if there's young kids and things like that involved. So we're quite relaxed in terms of that. We have done a lot of work to try and establish what people expect and want when they go on their holidays. And a lot of that stuff is very specific to holiday let properties. So
Yeah.
we will look at them in the round and basically say, look, what conventional wisdom in terms of proximity to commercial premises and things
Yeah.
like that has been in the industry. We need to move on a little bit and be a bit more sort of mindful of what people want and what they need. So there's that side of things. There's also, I suppose, from we can't lose sight of the fact that these properties are there not just to generate a sort of capital asset value, but that also, people will want to maximize the income that they can generate as well. So we don't necessarily expect them to be let a couple of days after completion. Will allow that 3-month grace period to do any refurbishment works, to redecorate and all of that kind of good stuff that's going to make those properties stand out in potentially areas where there are other holiday lets. So we will allow people to draw down the mortgage, do some work to really maximize the rental income that they can generate before they then start to market that property, which again, I think appeals to a lot of investors, because that's exactly what they want to do, right? They want to make sure that they're getting the best return for their investment.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, we're using the human underwriting. That, again, I know there's many that still have that, but we've got our it's not a case of the computer says no. We've got human underwriters that look at each case individually, and we've got our property team as well. So that really does help in decision making and looking at each case, even though it may not fit in the box, but also looking outside of the box.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got an incredibly experienced, incredibly knowledgeable underwriting team, plus the property risk team as well. There's a lot of experience within Hodge that is really capable of getting under the skin of proposals and understanding what's going on here and why we should look to do it. We do underwrite everything. We make sure that there are eyeballs on every single case, to make sure that we are looking at it through that lens of, let's look to lend wherever we possibly can. Our computer doesn't say no. Quite frankly, we're amongst friends here. Our computer systems barely say anything at all. So everything is down to the knowledge and the expertise and the abilities of our underwriters. And there's we've done an awful lot to make sure that there's a consistency of approach as well, so that anybody who's picking up a case is looking at things fully aligned to the risk appetite of Hodge.
Yeah, perfect. Stu, over to you.
That's great, but you've kind of answered part of the next one. So I was going to ask what our view was on these properties that need what I used to call in a previous show a bit of a tart and a turn. So I think for the benefit of the guys on here, what the type of things then that we would consider that maybe weren't right to rent tomorrow, and the ones we say, do you know what, there's too much work that needs to be done for there.
Yeah, I suppose again, it's looking at that common sense thing. Let's not forget that we're looking at we're kind of, this conversation is almost looking at it on a purchase basis, but we'll do remos as well. So my instinct is to say, if there's any significant structural work, then we're not going to do it. But if that work is well in train and there's it's just a bit of finishing and snagging that needs to be done, then again, no dramas. That kind of 3-month 3-month element is key, really. I mean, 3 months should give you ample time to do all the cosmetic work, plus also potentially putting in new kitchen, new bathroom, sorting stuff out in the garden. So there's a lot that can be done in that 3-month period. So as long as we're happy that the works are going to be carried out within that 3 months, and then the property is going to be able to be put on the market for letting, then that's absolutely fine by us. And as I say, it keeps coming back to the point, we'll allow people to capital raise for that purpose as well, but what we're actually doing is allowing them to increase not only potentially the value of the property, but also that monthly, weekly, weekend rental
income
that they can generate as well.
Yeah, so I think for the guys on the call, it's those ones where you've got them and they need that little bit of work. It's not the thing that we're suddenly out. It is to pick up the phone, send me and Hema the property details. what you've got there, and we'll look at it. We're not just going to say no straight off the bat like a lot of lenders. We will look at these type of situations for you. I think that's the main takeaway from this at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, just to come back on the lease point as well. It is 85 years. I've
There
managed
we
to
go. I was
successfully
right.
do that.
Hem, I think you've got
Perfect.
one more to ask from
One more
ourselves.
question, and I think someone's already, and I know we're going to cover the questions in the chat functionality as well, but I think someone's already kind of asked that question, but we'll just try and kill two birds with one stone. So I know we've been offering holiday let mortgages since November 2019, and it's fair to say that the market has evolved considerably since then, but including the announcement in the budget last week, and I know that stat that Stuart put, like, I think it was like 75% of saying that they weren't aware of the tax implications. So having said that, how do you think this might impact the type of case that we see submitted with Hodge, comparing to those prior to the announcement? Now, it'd be interesting to have your take on this, to be fair, because especially according to that stat that Stu pulled out earlier from, was it Sykes Cottages or Minto?
The 74% stat.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's kind of where I'm coming from as well. My personal view is that I don't see this being a market that's going to diminish and dwindle just because of a couple of tax breaks that are no longer available. I genuinely think that there is sufficient income to be generated from a good, solid holiday let property that, yes, the tax break is a nice to have, but I genuinely don't see it being a deal breaker in the vast majority of cases.
Absolutely.
You might find that your portfolio landlords maybe start to look at limited company and things like that, and that's fine. They were probably looking at that anyway, quite frankly, prior to any announcement about a sort of relatively small tax break. But my personal view is that there is now a maturity around the holiday let market. There is a kind of understanding that an awful lot of people aren't just jumping on the first plane to Benidorm now. I think there is more of a push for sort of UK based holidays, and if that's the case, the demand is going to be there. The capital gain is likely to still be there, but also the rental income is going to be there as well. So I genuinely don't think, I was asked, funnily enough, I was asked the question the day after the budget, what are we going to do? And it was by somebody external. What are we going to do now in terms of any holiday let applications we receive? And I said, well, exactly the same as we were going to do yesterday prior to the announcement. I don't think that there's anything in terms of our policy or our criteria that is fundamentally affected by the sort of budgetary changes. And I also don't think that a lot of people who've got this desire to have a property maybe by the coast or in a rural area that potentially they want to retire to in 10, 15 years time, I don't see now that losing a tax break is going to mean that they change their plans fundamentally. And I suppose the final thing is that what we've also done, what we haven't done, what has also happened is that people have potentially lost the opportunity to retire on the continent as well because of Brexit rules and that kind of, you can only stay for 6 months at any of any given 12-month period. So there's probably going to be more in terms of people looking at sort of desirable properties that they see long term is going to be where they want to set roots down. And in the meantime, why not use it to generate a decent amount of income as well? So yeah, I don't see this going to be huge changes personally.
Yeah, and I think that's what my takeaway was as well. But let's watch your space, and just to kind of highlight again for those who are interested in that, I would always say, and I know we've mentioned it a few times, seek advice from a tax specialist in relation to that. So should we cover we've got some time left, and we're going to cover the questions that are in the chat functionality. I know you've covered
I've gone back
some.
and answered a few. So yeah, just to answer all. Limited company, not at the moment, guys. We are just in personal name. As Rob said there, if you've got any leasehold, there's a minimum left of 85 years. There's a question from Chris at Resolve asking, how much a risk to the holiday sector do you see local authorities limiting holiday lets in certain postcodes, and do you expect this to increase in time? I suppose it's one of those at the moment.
Do you want me? Yeah. Do you want to take that bit, Stu?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
if you want
can.
a minute.
You know, I suppose first and foremost, we've got experience of this already because we lend in Scotland. We know that, you know, the Scottish devolved government brought in licensing for short-term lets, and we've kind of navigated a path through that quite successfully, I think. You looked at it initially and you thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be really tough because people need licenses. You actually look at what they need to do to get a license. It's not that onerous, really. You just got to basically make sure that the property is in reasonable nick and is, you know, there's a health and safety aspect and things like that. But it's all stuff that good landlords should probably be doing anyway. So yes, I think there is probably a sort of groundswell of opinion now that that is something that's going to be rolled out in other parts of the country. But our experience dealing with the Scottish stuff will help us there. I don't think it's hugely onerous for people to do. It is difficult, and you know, we touched upon it earlier. There is that balance to be struck between making sure that homes are affordable for local people, as opposed to just being swallowed up by investors in the, you know, in entire towns and villages and communities. But that is a problem that is being looked at. I don't see constraining the holiday let market is going to necessarily bring property prices coming down to within the reach of somebody who's potentially just left school or taking their first job or whatever it happens to be. I don't see there being that level of correction. So I think some of this is probably a bit political rather than necessarily completely meaningful. But as I say, I keep coming back to the fact we've got experience now in this sort of local licensing area. I think it'll probably be replicated across the country. But my final thought on it is that I don't think we're going to get too many local authorities doing that turkey voting for Christmas kind of thing when they know the value of the income that's generated by having a tourist sector. So I don't think it'll be as bad as people perhaps first imagine, because, you know, ultimately there is this kind of whole economy that's built around holiday lets and you know, tourist income, and I don't think anybody's going to want to get rid of that anytime soon.
4.3 billion. It's a lot of money. Yeah, I
It
fully
is.
agree. I fully agree. I think we've covered off all the other questions within the chat, guys. If anyone else has got anything else to ask, like myself, Hema or Rob, feel free to message us after this. But just to finish off, I just want to thank everyone for dialing in today. Thanking Hema, thanks for Rob for joining me for hosting this today. I put in the chat facility the link for our contact details. So if you don't know who your BDM is, please use the link on there. Put your postcode in, it'll pop up who is your local BDMs. We can share the screen, and there was a few people asking for the slides. Yeah, we can share the slides over, that's no problem. This has been recorded as well today, and it'll appear on the Hodge website the next couple of days. If anyone missed or joined late, you're welcome to catch up off the back of it. But yeah, just to finish up, a massive thank you for dialing in today. Hopefully you've picked up some useful hints and tips. We haven't bored you too much in the last hour or so as well, fingers crossed. And we look forward to doing some really good business with you going forward. So thanks for your time, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.